So you were a lawyer before you kind of got into human design and everything, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Like
was.
how did that transition kind of happen, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think I was always going to be a lawyer. Like, I was 5 years old and I was like watching Ally McBeal, like, I'm going to be a lawyer.
Whoa.
And it really like
Mm.
suits me and it suits my skill set. But I was always at the same time that lawyer who was like astrologically profiling all of my clients in
Whoa,
secret,
really?
like everyone in the team. Like, I always knew. And it occasionally, like, and as I became like more comfortable, like I wasn't a junior lawyer anymore and I became more senior, I talk about this kind of stuff. And I just love like studying the
Whoa.
human condition
Awesome.
and figuring out like how people approach things differently. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
when I was practicing law, I was always like better at being the mediator or the negotiator
Mm-hmm.
than like, like being argumentative or abrasive. I think a lot of
Oh,
people,
okay.
they think that lawyers are always just like abrasive or oppositional by nature. And to
Yeah.
me, I was like, that's like, that actually solves very little and
Mm.
actually creates more problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved like taking that
Mm-hmm.
um like conscious approach to like intercommunicational
Yeah.
like skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so like so much of that like came from my understanding of astrology and all different
Mm-hmm.
sorts of like self-awareness tools.
Wow.
And I got into human design when I was still practicing as a lawyer. It was pretty much like when I was at that like really critical stage of my career where it was like, really, really, really long hours. I was
Yeah.
working for a national firm
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing litigation as well. So it's just like, I mean, it's just like you live and breathe it and you're up all
Yeah.
night and you're just billing
Mm.
every 6 minutes and it was so full on. And
Mm-hmm.
then I found human design and it sort
Yeah.
of brought all of these modalities together that I already
Yeah.
like had so much, I
Mm-hmm.
placed so much value in and I could see how useful they were. And then human design like packaged it all together and added like even
Mm.
more useful information. So
Mm-hmm.
I started like my human design experiment just personally
Yeah.
back in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of as I was like, I think entering my Saturn return. And
Right.
then I
That'll
kind
do
of
it.
got to the point where I was like, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't like
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that was like it was like the last frontier of my human design experiment was like the major commitment of my energy that was being misdirected to my job.
Mm-hmm.
And it became clearer and clearer to me that I was like, oh my God, like I'm never actually going to be using my energy correctly whilst I'm in
Mm.
this job.
Oh,
Because as an
wow. Okay.
MG, it had
Right.
become boring. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Okay. So as an
Um,
MG, you kind of just got to go where it's exciting for you. Like you can't stagnate kind of thing
yeah,
in a way.
totally.
Mm.
Yeah. And look, I think the word exciting is it's like the correct explanation of what needs to happen for an MG in terms of our
Mm.
energy, but
Yeah.
not quite just that, because I think sometimes when people are like follow what lights you up, and if you're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
lit up, don't do it. It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
okay, well, people can sit around like waiting for this like really amazing exciting
Mm.
thing, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like seriously, like the realities of life is that it's not always going to be like, not you're not
Mm.
always going to have this like opportunity from the universe that's going to be
Mm.
like, oh my God, I'm jumping out of my pants.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it's more just a feeling of like activation, like you just have
Yeah.
the energy in your body to do it, like ample
Yeah.
energy. So that's
Oh,
like
yeah.
what I would say to anyone who's like a sacral being.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to have some kind of like energy activation to know that that's the correct investment of the energy. But
Okay.
the like sort of the colloquial thing you hear in human design is like your sacral must be lit up.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was like I kind of got to a certain level of mastery in law. And then it was like, I just feel like I'm pushing shit up a hill every day. It's not
Mm-hmm.
satisfying anymore. It's
Yeah.
the same old thing. And the joy just like drained away. And then I was just left like in debt, in deficit.
Mm,
So
mm.
I guess like with human design, like from like if we're just talking about the aura types, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's got like zero to do with personality. It's
Mm-hmm.
got
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with personality. It's all
Mm-hmm.
just to do with like the mechanics of your aura, so your
Mm-hmm.
energy.
Mm-hmm.
And being an MG, like who was investing all my energy into something that wasn't giving me a return on my investment,
Right.
I just went so far into the negative. And that's what
Yeah.
burnout is really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like totally burnt out. Like I got to the
Yeah.
point where I was like self-sabotaging my own career.
Mm-hmm.
And then like 2020 and the pandemic hit, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh my God, like the aliens are fucking arriving. I'm just gonna quit my job. Like
All right. Okay.
I'm not gonna like waste any more of my life. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if 2020 had that effect on you as well, but it kind of like put things in perspective a bit where you're like,
Oh yeah.
oh shit, well, anything
Mhm.
can happen. So
Yeah.
I better like, you know, stop messing around.
Yeah. 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 Well, and what you said about like sometimes the universe doesn't have some amazing thing lined up for you. Like I think sometimes it's not about going to some exciting thing, but it's just literally going away from the thing that's draining you or that doesn't feel good. And that's another kind of
Yeah.
like it's like basically trying to not lose energy. It's like instead of trying to gain energy, like first and foremost, let's try not lose any energy, right? And then maybe something
Yeah,
exciting will kind of light you up.
that's right.
Mhm.
So it's just like your energetic currency, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's like a lot of talk in human design about burnout generally and like how
Yeah.
that affects different energy types.
Mm.
And the way I kind of see it for sacral beings
Yeah.
um, is that, you know how like if you have like a salary and a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
the bank will give you like a big ass mortgage. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
go seriously in debt because you've got that steady income.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like what happens with sacral beings because we've got this regular income, so to speak, of like, for want of a better word, consistent sacral energy. I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
find that like we can go further in debt because it's
Oh, right, right, right.
like we've got that stable income, so then we're granted more of a debt, but then we
Right.
like
But you don't
seriously can
realize
fuck
that's
ourselves
kind of
up.
pulling you into the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right,
And then
right.
like say for instance, like a non-sacral energy type, like
Mhm.
projectors, reflectors, and manifestors,
Mhm.
they, you know, they might feel like the sting of burnout a little bit quicker, but they
Yeah,
you know, they
right.
might blow out their credit card, but they're
Yeah,
not
right.
necessarily gonna like go into like bankruptcy because they were never given that credit to begin with.
Oh,
So
yeah, right, right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a
yeah.
good analogy, actually.
So
That's
that's kind of what
interesting.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mm,
do you want to maybe
yeah,
quickly
so
go
that's kind
over
of what
like
happened.
the 5 energy types for anyone, like for like the 11 people that might listen?
Mm.
So just like just so they
Ah!
have a better idea of kind of yeah, I guess like when you go into human design, like the first thing you kind of get introduced to is energy types, right? Like aura types.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely the starting
Mhm.
point,
Yeah.
and there's so much, but
Hmm.
yeah, so it's all, I guess, like at the outset, like
Hmm.
it's human design is just like a system that's there to guide you towards self-awareness in terms of
Hmm.
your own energetics. And it covers everything from the most mundane functions of your body, your physical
Yeah.
health, to
Hmm.
you know, the energetics that tie into larger concepts like our purpose and our sense of
Mm.
like personal expression.
Yeah.
So it takes like the I Ching, the
Hmm.
Kabbalah, the Hindu chakra system, and
Hmm.
astrology, and it
Yeah.
brings it all together.
Hmm.
And then you get like this hyper detailed chart that's unique to you. But it adds in, and this is where I think human design is actually useful.
Yeah.
Like, take all of that stuff, do with it what you will. It's all
Hmm.
archetypes, it's all
Yeah.
universal laws and stories around the
Yeah.
human experience.
Right.
But separate to those stories is like the actual, how do you navigate like
Hmm.
those stories, like what do you
Mm.
do with that information,
Yeah.
and how can you approach it in a way that's like empowering and insightful and like conscientious.
Yeah.
So you start by looking at your energy centers, which are like a modern reflection of the chakra system.
Hmm.
Chakras, there's only 7 chakras,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But in human design there's 9, and
Hmm.
that's because we've evolved as a species.
Hmm.
And from those 9 chakras, like depending on what's activated in your unique chart, that
Yeah.
determines what your energy type is. And we call it energy type in human design. Some
Yeah.
people call it aura type.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what that's referring to is just, you know, the way that your the mechanical operation of the energy that surrounds your body and your
Hmm.
form.
Hmm.
And, you know, we can use the word aura, we can use the word quantum field,
Hmm.
subtle body, like whatever you want to say. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter if you're not spiritual.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
or not, or
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you identify as, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no way you can dispute that people have like a vibe.
Yeah, like an
Like,
energy. Yeah. You can
yeah,
feel it.
energy.
Yeah.
So like you can totally, and like,
Yeah.
everyone's been in like the doctor's office, and like someone walks in and like
Yeah.
they don't say anything, but like the room changes, and they're either like
Yeah.
a grumpy person or like you can feel
Mm.
it.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um
course. Yeah.
yeah. So like aura type, energy types, talking about that. And
Yeah.
so in human design, there's 5 types,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
4, depending on who you speak to. It's a bit of a semantics thing.
Yeah.
Um, but the idea is that those types
Mm-hmm.
comprise exactly the right energy dynamics that the whole human species needs to
Mm.
continue to evolve forward. So
Oh,
they all have
interesting.
a function. Yeah, it's everything in
Okay.
human design relates back to evolutionary biology, which is like,
Whoa.
I just
Oh,
geek out
okay.
over this.
Damn. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah. It's so interesting.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the 5 energy types, they all need each other. They
Mm-hmm.
all assist each other in some ways and hold
Yeah.
each other accountable.
Yeah.
And the idea is like, that's the collective, like that's the hive, right? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
bees, it's like they all have their role and
Yeah.
in the beehive, and that's how they like work together to advance the hive and get
Mm-hmm.
done what they need to get done.
Yeah, yeah.
So the 5 types is
Cool.
manifestors.
Mm-hmm.
They are they're the only energy type that can sort of initiate. And
Mm-hmm.
when I say initiate, it's like almost like the creation of new energy, or the actual sort of pulling it through into this realm for the first time.
Mm.
So it's getting a bit like quantum
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
physics sort of related, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go for it.
manifestors initiate
Mm-hmm.
new pathways for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the tribe to then follow down. So their aura, if you think about like, the physical quantum field of energy that's surrounding them, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually the largest.
Right.
It's the largest, and it's if you were going to like give it a form, you would say it was set and shield like. So the manifestor's aura can move energy
Mm-hmm.
and create a new pathway with that energy. And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, new creations, new things can unfold. And the other
Mm.
energy types like have roles to play in that initiation. So
Mm.
that's the way their energy works. There's a lot to that. It's quite, because it is such a set and shield like energy.
Yeah.
It does operate as a barrier, and it can sort of rally other energies to it. So if you imagine like
Right.
it's like
Wait, sorry, did
the
you say set? Set and shield?
set, it's like a shield. Yeah, so
Oh,
it's set, it's not
oh, I see what
it's
you mean. Right,
solid.
like, it's quite fixed, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you mean? Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
fixed, sorry.
Yeah.
Or like, it's solidified in a way.
Mm, mm.
So that's the manifestor's aura and the way it sort of works.
Yeah.
And then we've got generators.
Are you able to give like is there like a real life person we could kind of visualize what a
Yes,
manifestor might be like?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite manifestor is
Uh-huh.
J.K. Rowling.
Oh, oh
So
damn, really? Okay.
yeah,
Wow. Well, she
created
created
newness in
magic,
the
man. She
world.
created Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's
Okay.
it's always to have an impact
Yeah.
on the collective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So manifestors don't create this newness for themselves. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
selfish thing. It's impact that's going outwards into the world. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she's a really cool manifestor.
Amazing.
Yeah. So manifestors, then generators. So
Uh-huh.
generators and manifesting generators,
Mm-hmm.
like some people say they're the same type, some people say
Mm-hmm.
they're two separate types.
Yeah.
The thing they have in common is that sacral energy, which was what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
They basically, that sacral energy is like creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
The way that the aura of a generator works is it's
Yeah.
actually enveloping. So remember I said the manifestor's aura, it's like a shield, like
Yeah.
it pushes things out.
Uh-huh.
Well, generator energy can like pull things into it, like a warm hug,
Oh.
like come
Oh.
into my aura. Like you
Yeah.
can really be like intimate in a generator aura.
Mm.
And the reason for that is because actually their function as sacral beings is
Mm-hmm.
that when they're operating correctly, they generate energy.
Mm.
So when it's generated and then their aura is open,
Mm-hmm.
they share that with the collective.
Mm.
So an example would be like, I'm a manifesting generator. Like when I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing something that I'm really like activated by, I'm sharing that physical energy through my
Mm-hmm.
aura with people who are around me.
Mm-hmm.
and like the generators of the world are like, you know, literally like the Beyoncés of the world. I love to use her as a like
Right.
example, but
Okay.
they're just doing it for pure joy and
Right.
creation.
They're just kind of shining
Mm.
their heart in a way. Kind of
Yeah,
that Leo energy, I
exactly.
guess.
It is very, yeah, it is Leo energy. But it's also,
The sun.
it's more, it's personal because it's
Mm.
like the generator or the manifesting generator is
Mm-hmm.
doing that for their own sense of personal satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it this way, like Mother
Yeah.
Nature made them love it so that they would do it more.
Right.
You know, it's that simple. Like
Yeah.
Mother Nature's that simple.
Yeah.
And then
And
there's
sorry, how would you
projectors.
differentiate between generators and manifesting generators?
Oh yeah, good question. Um, so manifesting generators, like in terms of like the mechanics in their chart, they've got a connection between like the sacral and the throat.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a generator energy type because the sacral is so powerful. As soon as you have that activated, your aura is operating like a generator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But manifesting generators have sort of like a bit of a quick manifesting ability. They're
Mm-hmm.
not the same as manifestors because their auras don't work in the same way that pushes energy,
Mm-hmm.
but they can initiate to a certain degree and they move very fast. So I kind of think about it as like generator energy will hone in on something that it loves
Mm-hmm.
and that it sort of is activated by, and
Mm-hmm.
then it just like latches on and it's like it just starts to like chug away and it's like
Mm-hmm.
gaining momentum and it's gaining mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Manifesting generator energy goes so many different directions at
Oh,
one
okay.
time.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like the thing they usually say is like manifesting generators are multi-passionate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true, but it's also a bit like, well, like fuck, heaps of people are multi-passionate. Like I
Yeah.
just don't think that's really helpful.
Right.
It's more just like the energy can go in multiple directions and sort of
Mm-hmm.
feel pulled in different directions at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Manifesting generators, the way I see them designed is that they're actually here to be a bit more exploratory,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and generators are sort of here for more mastery.
Oh,
So both are
interesting.
like essential elements of creative
Yeah.
energy
Yeah.
and the ability to share creative energy, but
Right.
one is more you
But
know,
one is kind of
about
more
like
specialized and one is kind of more generalized in a way. Like one is wider and one is more
um
niche. Like there's a tendency to be.
yeah, because of the mastery, you could say that. But
Yeah.
like I get scared about using those words because they're like demonstrative, of course, but then people
Mm.
like latch onto one little word and go, I can only niche because, you know.
Oh,
So
right. No, no,
I
no.
just,
Of course. Yeah. It's like a
yeah,
tendency. It's like you might, but you could also just do whatever you want, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
we have to understand we're not talking about like the
Mhm.
conscious choice. We're talking
Mm.
about the way the energy moves.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
Right. I
manifesting
see.
generators,
Yeah.
they tend to sort of want to explore. So what that energy does is it goes
Mhm.
and it goes down a path. Like
Mhm.
like how manifestor energy might go down a path,
Mhm.
but it gets to a point where it's like, oh, I'm done here. I want to go somewhere else.
Mm.
So it's always sort of finding an edge.
Yeah.
Whereas a generator, once it locks on with the sacral, it will be like, oh, I'm like, and it will evolve and it will, you know, you might want to do different things if you're a generator. You're not always going to want to do the one thing,
Mhm.
but the flavor of the energy, like the flavor of their aura,
Mhm.
will continue in that mastery in some way.
Mm.
It just might
Right.
be building on it from different building blocks or different avenues in life, but it's still like invested in that one thing that like
Okay.
lights them up.
Cool. Cool.
But
Nice.
that's just one way of explaining
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
and
And I
one way
get you.
that
I
it can
get you. I
show
know
up.
it's so multifaceted, and
Yeah,
we can only do so
it
much.
is.
But so I think,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
within the limitations of language, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so
Cool.
yeah, and
Great.
then projectors, which is
Projectors.
what
Yeah.
you are,
Mm-hmm.
they they're like the newest energy type, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
say in human design that in 1781 the
Yeah.
human species evolved, and that's when we sort of developed these
Mm-hmm.
new energy centers or chakras.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, like that makes so much sense. Like our brains are evolving. We've become more complex as like a species.
Mm-hmm.
And so the energetic formulations of how we relate to each other and how we relate to the world, of
Mm-hmm.
course, that needed to evolve as well. Like we've become more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
So projectors have only been around for like the last 250 years. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're really like a reflection of like where humanity is headed, which
Mm-hmm.
like God, it gives me a lot of hope
Mm-hmm.
for the future.
Right.
Projectors have an energy which naturally sees through multiple layers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much an energy of sight. It's an energy that goes into other things and conducts an assessment and sees what is in there. So usually we would describe projectors as being like just that, like, you know, quintessential guide energy, because you can see, you can guide. And remember before I said like generator auras are like enveloping, and manifestor auras are like shield like. Well, projectors auras are penetrating. They are sort of like laser focused. When they're focusing their aura, it is going fully into that other thing, whatever it is it's focused on, and it's like it's in there, it's experiencing it. It's like it's got a tan through the veil sort of thing, and it's like, what is in here? So by having that ability, projectors can always see and understand like different layers of energy that maybe other people don't have access to. And so they're here to then bring an understanding of that complexity to them, to the tribe, and that way they can guide others. But they're not a traditional leader in the terms of like, you're not here to like boss people around with that energy or direct people with your energy in a way that's sort of pushing. It's a like just showing a new way. So they say like, you know, that's why we're seeing more projectors being born, because like we are really in need of that guidance right now. And as we've become more complex beings, we need to understand our world in a more complex way in order to be healthy, because we need to understand the complexities of ourselves. So that's really cool. And then
and
you
can you
can
give us
see
an
how the other
example
energy types,
of a
a
projector that,
projector,
yeah.
Barack Obama.
Oh, was he? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's a projector, so you know, really seeing like the nuance in things.
Wow.
I don't know who else, but yeah, so projectors, and then
he's a
there's
good example.
Yeah, I think so. I thought he was great. And then there's reflectors. So reflectors are super rare. They're like usually about 1 or 2% of the population, and they, in their chart, they have none of the energy centers are like defined or like at all. So they're completely white if you look at their chart. The function of a reflector is their auras actually sample everything. So they're sampling the environment, they're sampling the collective, they're sampling the cosmic weather that's streaming down on Earth. And in having that function and with nothing filtering it, they mirror it back out to the world. So the idea is that you need a reflector in every tribe to mirror back the health of the tribe and to keep them all accountable. And it's kind of like, well, it's like, imagine that you gained weight or something, but you never weighed yourself.
Oh,
like you could pretty much like live it. You could live in like denial for a while. You could be like, oh, I gained weight. Like, do you know what I mean? And the reflector's like, you need to go like stop eating this like chocolate every day or something like that. Like they're holding you accountable. So it's really interesting to see the way reflectors can like impact other people. They really reveal when something's not healthy. You know what I mean? They really reveal when something's not healthy, when something's not working, just by the natural function of their aura.
And I believe Teal Swan, if you know her, she's a reflector.
Is she? I think
I think so.
I might have seen that somewhere. That, I mean, it would make sense.
Like her job is very, it seems like that's all she does. Like she samples everything in society, and she kind of just like, oh, here it is. Here's everything that's good or
Here's
bad
the
or
truth.
whatever.
So they really they provoke with that energy. And it's just interesting because you can see how we just need each other so much, but as well, like we need we as individuals who are like members, like we're all socialized beings, like literally cannot survive without each other. It's so important from like, you know, for the future success of the species that we embrace our energy types and that we step into the true power of them, because that's the only way that the collective is ever going to get into that sort of beautiful symbiotic relationship again. And also return to our symbiotic relationship with nature, because that's our own true nature, you know. I think human design is so important in terms of reminding us that we're actually just animals on this planet,
Mm.
and that we have like a correct way to function.
Oh, wow. Right.
You
Okay.
know, like when you're like, I always think about this, like any other animal, right? Like, you know, whether like I'm imagining like a wolf cub,
Yeah.
and the mom like takes it out. It's like, okay, we're going into the forest and I'm going to teach you what you can eat, and this is how you hunt, and this is what you do, and when the weather's like
Mm.
this, we know that we're going to go find a cave, and like all of the things, like just
Right.
the natural things of how to be a
Uh-huh.
wolf.
Yeah.
Like we just ain't doing that anymore as a
Yeah.
species. Like we've become so smart that we've become dumb. And
Yeah.
like, you know, we don't go to the toilet when we need to, we don't eat when we're
Mm.
hungry, we don't,
Yeah.
like, we just do the stupidest shit every day, and we go to school and then we do standardized tests,
Yeah. Well, we've been
you know,
conditioned
like,
to be a certain way, defined by something else that wasn't, that wasn't maybe necessarily as aware, as someone that might know human design of how to actually. It's kind of like human design in a way. I feel like it's like an instruction manual in a way for your
mm,
personal self, so you know how to pilot and navigate yourself better,
yeah,
right? So it's like if you don't have that and you have all of these ideas that other people have taught you that might not be compatible with you, then it's like, it's like someone, yeah, teaching you how to drive a car, but you're on a ship or something, or something completely different. Then it's like,
complete, yeah,
yeah, it just doesn't work.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. And I think it just like contributes to so much like inner turmoil that we all
Mm,
have.
yeah.
And it seriously stunts innovation.
Hmm.
like and I think about that in terms of particularly schooling. Just like we get sent to school, and you know, we have, oh, my earpod fell out. We have you know, one version of what it means to be an intelligent
Right.
student, and you
Hmm.
get graded. Like, we're,
Yeah.
so for one thing, we're like conditioned to be competitive,
Hmm.
um and abandon everything else.
Right.
And then because there's only one version of success, we're
Hmm.
never cultivating any innovation or creative genius, or, you know, all
Mm.
of the things that we need to like figure out how to get plastic out of the ocean. Like,
Right. Right. Right.
what, like, you know, how are we ever going to produce the child that's going to grow up and do that if we're
Yeah.
just like, you need to do maths, and if you
Yeah.
don't
Right.
do this version of maths and
Yeah.
succeed in that assessment of it, then like you're not going to be valued.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
see that as like a serious problem. But
Yeah. We
yeah,
don't
human
let
design
people
helps with that.
actually fully shine in the gifts that they have because we try and push them down a certain way that kind of limits those things.
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
exactly.
And it's really interesting what you said about like the whole animals thing. It's like, yeah, I guess like if you're like a wolf or something, like I guess your function's a little bit more obvious, right? Because you're very physical. You're in the wild. You just gotta like you gotta hunt and you gotta do things, and you kind of know I have these claws, right? Or I have these fangs. It's like, well, we know that this is what it's for. It's quite obvious. Whereas with a human being, it's so nuanced that because we can do so many things. You don't really know how to
Mm,
use yourself, or we could use ourselves in so many different ways. So then I think we do need a bit of guidance from, let's say systems like human design that actually like
mm.
because like we're not hunting anymore, we're not gathering berries, as
Yeah.
such, right? So it's like now it's like
Yeah.
we have this like higher consciousness, this evolved state of a human being. It's like, well, how do you actually properly use this more updated human, right? Instead of
Mm,
rather than trying to do like primitive things in an updated form, it's like, well, we need updated like software or understanding to
yeah.
actually use better what we have
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's another
Mhm.
form of storytelling, isn't it?
Mm.
Like, you know, humans since the beginning of time, the way that we've handed down sort of our customs and our way of approaching life and our societal values and
Mhm.
whatever, like, it's always been through storytelling. And I feel like at some point in history, religion sort of surpassed just the purity of storytelling, and it became
Mm.
like it had just like this agenda, which then took away from like the fact that storytelling was there as a rite of passage, so the tribe could continue to succeed, so that we could pass down through generations like, this works, this doesn't work, this is like the way of the world, this is the earth that we're living on, this is the reality, and this is how you navigate it. So we've lost that from our culture, like big time. Like there's very few rites of passage left. and there's very little ritual that has an actual meaning attached to it. Certain cultures around the world still have that, but it's really just dwindled down to nothing. And I think that's why like astrology has just like really stood the test of time, because it's like one of the last remaining things that we can cling to for like some guidance is to like, oh my God, like what the fuck is the universe? Like, where are we?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And human design is like a more embodied version of that. And that's why it's so helpful. Because like you said, it isn't as obvious as like, okay, I can feel into my body whether or not I'm good at climbing a tree to get something down from the top of the tree, but like now it's more subtle skills, like
it's super subtle.
Yeah. For instance, like you, like with your channel of like you've got the like your one channel, which you have like a super rare design, by the way, you know that already, like being a like mental projector. And like your channel of logic is like
the 63 64 one, was it is it that one?
Yeah, the 63-4.
Yeah.
So channel of logic, like that is all about just having a pressure or awareness to notice the patterns within patterns. And then as soon as something's incongruent with the pattern, it's like this little alert goes off and you go, oh my gosh, I'm doubting I'm doubting the integrity of this because something hasn't lined up. So that is an instinctual animal awareness. Like that's a function of your brain, like that's evolved through the human species.
Shit. Okay.
And you have that as like cranked up. So this is what human design teaches us. Like these are the potentials within our genetics, basically. And so your channel is like just calibrated to notice when something doesn't add up. And then it creates a pressure that goes, I'm watching this pattern. I'm always seeing these patterns. And as soon as something's not congruent with the pattern, it's like a little red flag goes up and says, let's ask a question. And immediately a question is formulated. Well, if you think about it from like, you know, the perspective of us just being animals, like that happens on an animal level, like throughout nature, like you're just plodding along and then something comes up and it's like, this is different. I need to do something different. So what you have is like the most highly evolved iteration of that. And in humans, it's formulated in terms of like, okay, I'm concerned about the future of my species. And so I'm looking out for anomalies. And logic is the function. Logic is the function that allows us to sort of moderate that and to sort of explore it with some sense of like tangible understanding. So it's like logic says, if this happens, XYZ may potentially happen within the laws of the universe, you know, like we understand what, like that's what logic is. So for you having that channel, it's like you just have this innate understanding of what may potentially happen on the scope of possibility if XYZ happens. And that allows you to predict. So it's having people like you in the society is really, really, really important, because it allows us to make wise decisions about how things should be structured. How should we organize things? How should we approach things that's actually going to be to the benefit of everyone? It's very much a collective energy. So yeah, like all of the things in human design come back to like, okay, like how do we just function as a species in a way that's like,
that's so interesting, because it's like that's so cool that you described it like that, because like we said earlier, you know, like if you're a wolf and you have fangs, it's like, well, we need to use the fangs to eat meat, right? That's kind of what we use it for. But for human beings now, it's not so much, you know, these obvious physical things, but it's like things inside of us. It's like certain channels. It's like you might not have fangs, but you might have a channel that's your weapon, or whatever, you know, you want to call that. But then that's like someone might have a different channel with a different weapon, and that's kind of like their makeup, and that's kind of what they might be better at and stuff. But we would never know on a physical level, because these things become so energetic and so subtle that, you know, we might need something like human design or whatever to kind of identify those pieces of us.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we don't see, like, to go back to the hive analogy, like
Mm,
there's certain bees in the hive that, you know,
mm,
they cultivate the royal jelly for the queen bee to eat so that she can then have like these antibiotics that filter down to all the baby bees.
yeah,
And it's like those bees, they didn't just wake up one day and be like, you know what, I quit this job, or
yeah.
you know what, I'm going to go do a different bee job. Like if
Mm-hmm.
they do that, the whole hive would die without
Mm,
that antibiotics. So
yeah,
it's like we all have like a very critical role. We all
yeah,
have a purpose, and you can wrap that up in spirituality and
mm,
and feel, you know, like this is my divine like calling.
yeah,
Or you could look at it from the perspective of science, as in like,
yeah.
okay, we just have these genetics for a reason, and Mother
Mm-hmm.
Nature is always trying to maintain a balance. So she's sprinkling the perfect ratio of those talents in our genetics. And
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
only job really is to just honor them.
Yeah, just be
And then
yourself in
society
a
would be
way.
okay. Literally, just be
Yeah,
yourself
yeah,
is
that's
like the
yeah,
solution to the world's problems, but we're all
yeah,
trying to be someone else.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's about like that's why they call human design the science of differentiation,
Yeah,
because we're trying to step into our individuality. But it's
that's
funny to
right.
me because I
Yeah,
think, oh, like be yourself has like almost it's just completely lost its meaning, like because it's
yeah.
said so frequently,
It's
like,
so cheesy and
and you talk to success,
stereotypical.
yeah,
Yeah,
it is cheesy now, so people
yeah,
like hear it and they're like, okay, tell me something else.
yeah.
But
Right.
actually it's like, oh no, like seriously sit down with that, like
Yeah, yeah.
there's a million ways you're not yourself.
100%.
um
Yeah.
but we have to also be careful, I guess, like we are conditioned, and we are able to be conditioned
Mm-hmm.
for a reason as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, if we go back to like genetics and the way we're structured as a species, it's important that we're able to be conditioned by each other because we're a social species. So that's how we share wisdom. That's how we interrelate. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, again, to use another like nature analogy, like, you know,
Yeah.
those, and this is where like quantum physics is actually doing really cool, like, it's like making a lot of like connections with like fields, like
Mm-hmm.
field consciousness.
Oh yeah, like
So like
morphic
Matt,
fields, if you know about morphic
no,
fields.
I don't know. What is
Well,
that?
but it's yeah, it's kind of like the whole idea. I'll just summarize it quickly. Like,
Yeah, tell me. I
for
really need to
example,
know.
your like one thing is like, your memory isn't necessarily in your brain, but it's like your brain acts as an antenna to this kind of bigger morphic field kind of out there that contains all the information of everything ever, kind of like akashic records if you're talking from a spirituality perspective. And
Ah,
essentially
yes.
what you do, let's say with your memories, is like you perform morphic resonance with a past version of you, and that's kind of how you are retrieving your memories. And like other cool things where it's like, for example, the more people that master a certain skill, the more new people are faster at mastering the same skill, because essentially every time someone does anything or any
Okay.
mastery, it
Yes.
gets uploaded to the field like a giant iCloud, right? So then when new people come in, they can access the iCloud a little bit, and then they'll be able to do that skill a lot quicker than people that haven't, because there's this big backlog of kind of people that's already done it.
Ah,
If that makes
oh
sense.
my
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
Yes, yes,
So it's
yes.
kind of
Okay,
that
I'm
idea.
so glad. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
so glad you said that. That's
yeah,
exactly what I'm talking about. I just didn't know
yeah.
that's what it's called. Ah, stick. I need to go research this
Yeah,
more.
I'll
But
send
like
you some
exactly,
stuff.
it's like,
Yeah,
please do. But like
yeah,
that's exactly what it is. So like, you
yeah.
know, for instance, we have those open and undefined energy centers in our chart. And
Hmm.
they're not literal like things in our body. They're
Yeah.
like, it's an energetic perceptivity. And the reason for that is because that's the data that we're meant to be sharing with the
Hmm.
collective, you know, and we're meant to be receiving from other people who have those energy centers defined.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, it's very vital to the overall direction of the species. And you can see so many examples in nature. Like, I'm not a scientist by any means, but
Hmm.
you can see so many examples in nature where there is that shared field of conscious energy, like
Hmm.
the fish that's swimming in schools and they know exactly how
Right.
to
Yeah.
turn at the
Yeah.
exact
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
time. Like,
Mm.
what is going on
Yeah.
there?
They're
So it's
following kind of, they
important.
tune into this field in a way, and then they're all kind of just waving with the field in a way. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love watching it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, you know, sometimes as well, like you might hear in human design, people
Mm-hmm.
talking about conditioning
Mm-hmm.
as though it's like this evil thing.
Mm-hmm.
But really
Oh.
it's not. We only want to like look at conditioning in an objective way
Mm-hmm.
so that we can get clear on what doesn't serve us and what
Mm-hmm.
does. So if you're really clear on what your energetic blueprint is, and that's why like having a human design reading or like understanding your human design, even just at the most basic foundational level, is so helpful, because then you can start to ask the questions. It's not that human design gives you the answers. If anything, human design gives you the questions that you need, so that when you're navigating life, you can really get clear on how to approach something and identifying whether that's something that you need to take as part of your energetic identity, or whether it's something that you need to leave for others. And that's really the deconditioning process. But people, I think that all conditioning is bad, and that's just simply not true. Like conditioning is really helpful in terms of maintaining like shared morality. Like if we didn't have that sense of like, okay, well, it's bad to like harm another human being, that's a form of conditioning. You know, we're taught that through our socialization as a species. So but
that
another
is a
really
good
cool
point,
thing, like,
because I do feel that as well. Like there is that narrative. It's like, oh, you should just destroy all conditioning within your system, and it's bad, right? But what you said actually, I think, is way more balanced. Yeah, it's good.
People can really take something like that and get so in their heads about it. And I get really concerned sometimes when I see stuff about human design being used in that way, and the same with astrology, but like it's the same with anything, you know, like over identification is just like another loss of your sovereignty. Like it's just like, it's like spiritual bypass, but it's actually it's like harmful, you know. You're just giving away your power, and and not taking any accountability. But
that's
I think like going back to what you're saying about like morphic fields. Am I saying that correctly?
Morphic fields.
Yeah, morphic fields. I have this theory that that's what astrology and the archetypes that we see in these systems, like the I Ching, like the Kabbalah, like all of those things. I really feel that all of those, because when you study them and you see that they're all so consistent. And I love Carolyn Mace's work for that reason. I don't know if you've heard of Carolyn Mace.
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. I will send you go on her website. I'll send you her website and just watch her videos. She's like this sassy older woman from Boston, and she's just like the most amazing spiritual guide ever. I've learned so much from her, but she's such a realist, and it's so good for the ego to watch her videos.
Okay.
But yeah, she's someone who studied like all different religions and brought them together in a synthesis and drew analogies and drew the correlations as to where they're so consistent. Like all different religions in her book, Anatomy of the Spirit. And I have this theory, like that's part of the morphic field, as you would say, like that's all information that's in the data bank of like, okay, we understand these things about the human experience, about human nature and how it operates, about logic, about the physical world, like universal law. And that's stuff that like I get really like, I guess triggered. I get triggered when people are like, oh, you know, astrology, this, that. And I'm like, for one thing, you don't need to prescribe to what astrology or human design is telling you, because that's like counterproductive. But it is actually insanely accurate. And I think the reason for the accuracy probably has something to do with the way that morphic field operates within the human species. You know, it's in the iCloud. Like you can't deny it.
No, it's like somehow there's just these flavors or archetypes or these energies, right, that just kind of that permeate entirely throughout time and space over and over and over again. And it's like you can kind of like over time, if you notice the patterns, you can really see, oh, this is kind of that energy, and this is kind of that energy. And it doesn't it's like a piece of God, if you will.
It's like our cellular identity, really, like as who we are, as what does it mean to be human. And I find it really interesting because when you look at it, all these different modalities and these schools of wisdom, they're all from different cultures. You know, so they've got like, you know, these completely different cultural contexts in which they've been designed or written, but the underlying truths of them, and this is like what I was talking about with Carolyn Mace's work, like all of those like correlations are there. Like
Yeah.
it's the same story. It's the same
Yeah.
story of human nature. It's
Yeah.
the same story of where we've come from and where we're heading. And that's what I'm just like, oh my God, it's so interesting.
Yeah, well,
But
I
yeah.
guess it kind of like it reminds me of kind of like the hero's journey in a way, where it seems like there's always this kind of like pathway that we seem to go through, whether it's like over like millennia or a lifetime or just within a day. It's like there's this constant cycles in a micro level and also on a macro level that just seems to be like,
Yeah.
well, this is just that's kind of the thing the universe does, and you can observe it on a small scale, but you can also expand that to a bigger scale kind of thing, as above so below in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Mm,
Hero's journey is exactly it. And like
mm,
the death and the rebirth. And it's like
yeah,
there's like a million little deaths and rebirths in
yeah,
every minute, and then in every
yeah,
day, and then like in every human life.
yeah,
Ah, it's crazy.
yeah.
I was like reading something about
Mm-hmm,
like what like the ultimate like function of the universe is.
mm-hmm,
And it was like this rhythmic balanced interchange,
mm-hmm,
and that's like, you know, the give and the take, the birth and the re-death and the death, sorry. And it's like,
mm-hmm,
you know, where like the spiral energy is, it's just like that
mm,
constant give take. And
mm,
that's what they say, like the entire fabric of the universe is operating on that law. Like
mm,
something is causing a seed, the seed is taking energy from the earth and then producing, you know what I mean? Like everything is like give take, and
mm-hmm.
that's like the definition of unconditional love. So like literally it all boils down to that, which I'm like, okay, for one thing, that is cute.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
cute.
Right.
But also like it makes a lot of sense, because you know every religion, every esoteric school of thought or
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, they're always coming back to love.
Yeah,
And it's
right.
actually got like, you know, it's seriously important shit.
Yeah,
We need to
right.
be teaching that in school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know.
Mm,
Yeah, I love it, I love it.
yeah.
But yeah, have
Mm,
you experimented much like with your awareness around like operating as a projector, like particularly like a mental projector? Like what's your experience so far been like,
mm-hmm.
being like, okay, I found out this information, like how am I
Right,
putting
right.
it into my life?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, well, one of the biggest reliefs, I guess, about finding out about a projector is like you're not meant to work as hard as, say, a generator who has that defined sacred
Mhm.
energy, right? So they can just keep go. So I think for a long time, but I guess this is the thing, like if you have a lot of open centers, it's like and you're surrounded by other generators, you kind of absorb their energy, right? So then you kind of feel like, oh, I'm part of the pack, like I'm just like everyone else.
Yeah.
But when you kind of get alone and you kind of really get into your truth, you're like, oh, actually, like what the fuck was I doing? Like who is that? Like, you kind of like
Yeah.
you feel a bit like there's a kind of a certain difference to it, I suppose. But I guess that the big relief is to not pressure myself as much to work as hard as, say, a generator or a manifesting generator, and to kind of find my own pace with things. So I think that was
Yeah.
that was one huge thing. And also the whole
Yeah.
like the invitation thing, I think, was also quite important, because I think in the past, like when I did have certain like insights or things I want to say or help people, it's like if I started like jabbing too much, without kind of that desire to be jabbed, it wouldn't go very well, and I would feel bitter,
Mm,
as the projectors may feel, and it was just kind of like, oh shit, there's
mm,
no and in a way it kind of felt like, I need to jab you so that it's like I feel validated for the fact I have insight and I have the skills. But it's like if they don't want it, then it's like, well, I'm not really, it's like that's kind of me trespassing their boundaries for doing that. So if anything, I need to kind of find my own sense of security and wholeness and feel like, okay, I can just be me and do my thing and feel whole without feeling like I have to constantly go out and like be like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that, as if I'm trying to validate myself in a way. So that's kind
totally.
of something as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
huge, hey.
yeah.
It's big. It comes back to like what we were saying before about how it's to do with your, and it's your energy expenditure, it's your
Hmm.
spending
Yeah.
and returns on your investment. So for projector, a return on your investment is when you feel recognized, because you know that whatever you have, you get recognition when the insights that you've provided or the guidance you've provided has alchemized from just something you've pointed out into a tangible change in someone's life. And again, it's like, if you go back, and like Mother Nature wants you to do that because that's how you help the species. And so it made you like it. Like, it's that simple. It's like it made projectors like being recognized for sharing what comes naturally to them. If Mother Nature didn't put that little coding in, it's like, we need to write this code. If they didn't do that, would projectors share all of the juicy gifts they have? Maybe not.
Yeah, they wouldn't feel as drawn to doing that.
Exactly. And it wouldn't happen. So it's really important just to be like, okay, well, like, I want to do this because it's actually correct for me to be doing it. And it allows us to get really clear on our narrative around that, because there's even like, I mean, we've become so wrapped up in our heads and egos that there can even be people saying like, I feel guilty. And particularly, I think Australians and New Zealanders, like, we're quite modest in a lot of ways. And so like there can be like a lot of shame around like actually seeking recognition. You know, we're almost like deflective all the time. So when you take that narrative or that conditioning and then you apply it to your personal experience of life, you might be like, okay, well, have I been subconsciously holding back?
It's like, you know,
from
like, or
allowing
even
myself
like,
to want that.
well, even, you know, what they say with projectors, they're kind of their sign that they're working is success, right? Like they're there to get that's their
signature.
frequency, their signature, that's right. But then it's like, sometimes, like, you know, I've had this thought in the past as well. It's like, oh, am I being vain for wanting to be successful? Like, is that like, you know, is that like a bad thing kind of thing? And then you kind of doubt yourself, right? But then it's like, well, if I really let myself be truthful, it's like, yeah, no, I want to be successful. That feels really good. When it works, it's like, fuck yeah, like, you know, and that's a cool feeling. And it's like, you know, why am I shaming myself for wanting that when it's actually the truth?
Oh yeah. And it's like a huge thing, which I think like keeping us all enslaved, right? Like, you know, there are a lot of conditioning, and I'm very like cautious, I guess, of any conditioning that's like trying to take away our personal power. Because if we have no personal power, how the hell can we help each other? You know, but you're right. Like, it's so good just to have these conversations with ourselves so we can go, do I need to reframe my personal narrative? Like, as long as I'm clear on why I'm doing this, it's not bad. You know, and I need to stop judging myself. Like, society's made me judge that aspect of myself, and I'm not serving anyone. And the projector actually has so much value to add. Like, it's seriously like a tangible resource that all of us need, like desperately need. Myself as an MG, I like rely on the direction that projectors can give me. You know, there's certain directions I wouldn't be able to, the threads I wouldn't maybe be able to pick up without a projector's insight, you know. And there's certain like activations maybe that a projector might need from an MG, like to be creative and to like exploratory. So like we need each other. So, and the same applies to all the other types, obviously. So we really need to like relax into that. And I think, you know, what you said before about projectors and like the inner narrative that you had around yourself being like, am I overvaluing myself when I'm super productive because I'm surrounded by these sacral beings? And then when I go home and I'm by myself and I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted. And then you're like, what's up? But then you're like, okay, well, this culture like glorifies being busy. So I don't know if I should just like keep complaining and just keep dealing with this or what. So, but now that you're aware of your own energy, it's like, it's not that human design is telling you you can only work. And I'd be cautious of any human design narrative that said you can only work 4 hours or whatever. But it's actually about you having a totally objective and sovereign assessment of, am I moderating my own personal energy and spending my own personal energy currency on my own budget? Or am I operating off what I believe my budget should be? And that's the difference. Like, it's a huge difference. And when you manage your life that way, just with this idea of like, okay, well, I'm clear on what the expectation is, let me now have an embodied sort of experimentation around how much energy I do actually have to spend.
Yeah, well, because it's
And
like,
that, yeah.
yeah, like once we, like the moment we get into society, like we get conditioned into behaving in certain ways, and it's like we haven't even had the chance to kind of figure out what's right for us before being told, okay, this is how you should act, right? So then it's quite, so it's like, you come into this world, you're not given a opportunity to really, I guess, like practice using your intuition to feel into what's right. So you're completely reliant on society telling you how to behave. So then it's like when something like human design comes along, which is like another external thing, it's like instead of it telling you the first narrative, it's like it's actually telling you, okay, here's an alternative narrative that you might actually be better suited to, rather than the one that everyone kind of gets when they're born into this world. And like maybe you want to try this new narrative that might be better suited to you, and see how that feels. And then that kind of like, you're using this external tool to kind of come back into yourself and find yourself again.
Embodiment.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, it's so much of human design is really poised in the direction of like, okay, what intuitively feels correct, and what's like how you've experimented with it, how it's felt in your body. It's so tied in with all different, and it actually canvases all the different types of bodily intelligence that we possess, which, like you said, from the get-go, we are just like conditioned out of. I mean, right down to the things like being told not to cry as a child, being told to line up in class, like you all have to line up, you all have to sit down straight, like like your natural expression of your body. Like if you are a child and you've got a lot of energy and you want to get up and dance, like
well,
you're
like
not
being
allowed to
told
do
when to
that
sleep,
in
when to
class.
eat, when to every little thing. It's like this is the rules that's been
Disconnecting
passed
us.
down. But it's like, like if you go into like the PHS or whatever, it's like, well, actually everyone has different ways of eating or kind of consuming things. And just because the one narrative doesn't fit you doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you got to find your unique kind of expression for it.
So I guess, like, going back to what you were saying before about how, like, with humans, it's like it's not just like these basic things anymore. Like we've gone, like we've just like ascended so crazy, like in terms of our sophisticated bodies, that we're almost like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. So it's like we're grads, like you've gone, say for instance, you've gone to law school and you've got this like big professional degree under your belt, but you go out and like your first job, you're like, I had no fucking nothing. Like I know nothing at all. And it's kind of like we're at that point in humanity's evolution where we're like, oh my God, all the gear and no idea. Like
that's a really good point.
That's where we're at.
Because we are like, we can do so many things and we are so nuanced, but we are just so like illiterate in how to use ourselves.
Exactly. We're illiterate human beings. So like at some point, our brain's been vaguely aware of this, like maybe in the morphic field, and it's like, okay, we need to pull human design down from the morphic field, take all these different things and start giving ourselves a bit more of a framework from the perspective of culture. And so it's a tool of culture, but it's a tool of like, embodiment first and foremost. So I guess that's like my main point with human design. Like, do not use it in a way that, like, people do accidentally do this, because again, we've been so conditioned to just seek external clarification on things. But it should never be like telling you like, this is how you should do this. This is correct for you. This is not correct for you. We use that language because we're trying to lead people in directions. And that's okay, but we have to be super responsible in how we do that, because if you're someone who's like, I'm a generator and I'm, only meant to do something if I'm excited and lit up, and if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no, like all of the little things we see on Instagram.
You're right.
And you could literally sit there like twiddling your thumbs, being like, I'm waiting to be super excited about something, and you've still like not gotten into your body.
That's right. You're like, still operating out of this concept in your mind of like, this is how I should pilot my robot, but it's like, what do you actually feel? And what is real to you? What do you want?
Exactly. So that's why it's super helpful. I mean, like, this is obviously why I geek out about human design so much, but
no, well, I really appreciate your kind of bigger picture awareness of using these systems, because like you said, a lot of people do, it's like, well, there's one thing society tells you how to live, and you listen to that, kind of, and you don't pay attention to yourself. But then let's say if human design comes along and you do the same, it's like, well, maybe listening to human design like completely blindly, maybe that's better than just listening to kind of the default narrative of society. But ultimately, you still got to listen to yourself. Like everything is there to help for you to find, let's say, your authenticity, you know. And I think even with like spirituality, I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's like it's about finding what is really true to you and living in that truth moment to moment. It's not about kind of having these concepts and only living from this mental kind of conceptual level, but it's like, how do you actually truthfully live as you know, as your soul, this individual unique being.
And the thing is, like, I feel like there's a different morphic field that applies to the body than what applies to the mind. You know, the mind has like limited access, like with projections and assessments for the future. But the body is actually tapped in like on a cellular level to like the whole of humanity's history and your own unique combination of genetics. And so there's so much more valuable data in the body and in bodily intelligence. We should just be using the mind. We should say like, okay, well, the mind is just like the little zoom in, zoom out. Like it's just our little, it's like the aperture on our camera, right? It's just like either creating focus or it's zooming out. And we don't want the aperture to be taking the photo.
Right.
It's just directing the photo, you know. It's not the function of the camera.
That's right.
Like you can't do shit with just the aperture. You need film, you need all the other things. I love pointless analogies.
No, it's not. It's great. No, I love it. I love analogies.
Yeah, it makes it easier. But so that's the really important thing with human design. And I like can't stress that enough to people. It's not going to just like, unfortunately, it's not just going to tell you the answers. You have to experiment with it, but it's so much more fun to do that.
Yeah, well, it's a
and
guide
also,
in a way.
It means you don't have to learn it all. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it is a guide. And the thing I always say to people is like, you know, you might first look up your chart and there's so many pieces and it's so overwhelming and it's like, fuck, you need a master's degree to understand this. None of that information really matters, you know. The only really useful part of human design is the questions that it causes us to pose to ourselves that gets us in alignment with our embodiment. So you don't need to go and learn every single thing about human design or about your own chart even. Like it's not about that. It's just getting into the practice of being like, how is my energy processing this? And what is, you know, projection from my brain? Where is my brain creating narratives? And how is that separate to the energetics I'm experiencing in my body right now?
Like kind of bringing
and understanding the interrelatedness,
unconscious aspects of you that you may have had, would you say?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, well, that's kind of what Carl Jung says, right? Like, and his whole thing is about it's you know, it's like his thing is individuation, which sounds a lot like differentiation, right?
Yeah,
it's making the
exactly.
unconscious
Same
conscious.
thing. Yeah, exactly. It is the same thing. So again, it's like all stuff that's in the field. It's not anything new. It's not like a cult. I think some people think that.
Oh, really? Oh, I never had that.
Oh, you know, like people think that about astrology and yoga. Sure. And certainly people can make it that way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't take it that seriously. I just use it to remind me of the questions I should be asking myself and leave it at that.
Well, yeah, well, I think with anything, it's like, you know, if you take it too seriously and you get too attached, then again, you kind of go down this little trap again, right? So it's like you use it for what it is, but ultimately don't kind of lose your sense of self. You know, don't get so pulled away into these systems that you kind of lose yourself in it. Like if someone were to get into human design, like what would you say, like, you know, if they had a day to kind of just like look into it, like what would you say is the most kind of like bang for your buck thing for them to do? You know, like would you say like look at the auras or look at the strategies, the authorities, or like what would you kind of advise?
I would actually start with the energy types. Energy centers. Sorry. So there's 9 centers. If you can just understand the basic energies that each of them relate to. So each energy center filters, transmits, receives, and processes like a different group of energetics that relate to the human experience. So if you could look at a chart, and this is information that's easily available on the internet, but so you could find out, like, you know, just at a basic level, but then if you want to explore like the deeper dynamics of those energy centers, because that's all it is. Like that's the main, that to me is the main aspect of how are we processing and receiving energy, and how are we putting it out into the world. And so that really comes into play with like relationships.
Okay.
And also building an awareness around our conditioning and how we operate. So for instance, like for me, understanding that I have a defined solar plexus and understanding what a solar plexus as an energy center like is responsible for in terms of my energetic anatomy has really, it's just given me so much clarity around my experience of emotional energy. It's also my authority. So understanding that energy center is really important, because my authority is solar plexus, like emotional authority. And it allows me to understand, okay, how do other people, whether they have a defined solar plexus, an undefined solar plexus, or an entirely open solar plexus like you have, like how do those three different variations experience that energy? And it's just like about grouping energy really in the human body, and understanding the basic mechanisms of how it's received, how it's expelled, and how it relates with other people. And I have found that that has been the most transformational in terms of how I view my understanding of myself and how I view my understanding of other people. And it really simplifies it all. So you don't have to get so caught up in all of the different nuances. If you can even just build an awareness around, okay, for instance, I have an undefined ajna, which is the center that's like the mind. It's there to process, it's there to formulate creative concepts and ideas and solutions. I know that undefined ajna can receive that energy from other people. And so I'm literally open-minded. It's not correct for me to like, and I get like, you know, I'm cautious using that terminology again, but it's not always going to be beneficial for me to feel pressure, which I could feel externally, to always know the answer. I don't need to always know the answer.
Right.
So having that understanding and being like, just having that in the back of my mind, I can really like check myself sometimes and go, am I over identifying with something? Do I need to go research the opposite just to like get a little bit more clarity? Like, so it's just like that idea of like, what's my energy doing with my mind right now?
Okay. Right. Because someone could like someone could put that maybe energy in you, and you could get kind of overly attached to that energy, not realizing, oh, it's this isn't actually mine, and to kind of like let that go and not be so attached to it.
Because undefined, I should have said, like undefined and open energy centers can take in the energy, and when they do take it in, it's always amplified. So it's often where a lot of conditioning can come in. That's not a hard and fast rule though. You can be conditioned in other areas that, you know, it's not always about just your open centers or undefined centers. And you can certainly be conditioned in your defined centers as well. For instance, I have a defined solar plexus, but I noticed that I could become very dogmatic in my approach to my emotional reactions. So you can just because I have consistent emotional energy doesn't mean I can't be conditioned. I still had conditioning in my emotional. So I think that's something it's a bit more nuanced. But if we just looked at each of the energy centers and thought, okay, this is responsible for the energy that's showing up in my life in this grouping or this theme or this area, what's the energy dynamic? Like, where am I taking and where am I giving and where am I receiving and what's happening? Like, that to me is like the biggest thing. And it's also like, you don't have to remember like so much information then. It's just like, okay, what are the dynamics and how am I relating with other people?
Wow, that's really cool. I guess that kind of like everything that kind of comes out of human design, I guess, like comes from the centers in a way. Like the centers are kind of like the building blocks, right? And then everything kind of gets extrapolated from that. So if you kind of have a basic understanding of your centers, you kind of it's kind of understanding like, okay, well, on a car, this is a wheel, this is a steering wheel, this is a chair, like, kind of thing. Like you're kind of figuring out your internal schematics in a way.
Yeah, and literally you've just hit the nail on the head. If you understand the energy centers, you're naturally going to understand aura type. you're going to understand authority.
Okay.
Because the way that those energy centers are sort of like, the way that they're defined or undefined, or the way they're sort of formulated in your chart, that's determining what your energy type is, and that's determining what your authority is. So, and your authority is like your inner guidance system. So it's the highest, most strongly evolved awareness in your body. And so if you have an attunement to, okay, what's my most powerful awareness, like what's my strongest instincts, then you can always make the correct decision, or you can orient yourself in life in the way that's going to be the best for you, in terms of your divine timing, in terms of like what's actually going to support the expression of your gifts and teach you the things you need to learn. So authority is super important, but again, like strategy and authority come from the energy centers. And so we want to have an understanding of what those energy centers are actually doing before we can understand like strategy and authority.
Do you need to go, by the way? Because it's been like over an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, probably soon. But
okay,
yeah,
okay, cool. Just let me know if you
that?
need to go, then we'll wrap it up. I was gonna ask, like, do you think it'll get to a point, and I think this will be really cool, where it's like we have so much understanding of the different centers and all. It's like, well, you know, this person, maybe, you know, let's say me, okay, he's a mental projector, his crown and his ajna are defined, everything else is undefined. Therefore, there might be certain, let's say, tools out there that are more suited for this person than another person. You know, for example, like, I don't know, like, because I was learning about NLP recently, and there was a lot to do with like visualization in an NLP, and I'm like, well, would that be better suited for someone with a defined like kind of head area, because maybe that's where like all the kind of chaos is, right? So then they need to kind of use visualization to maybe, I don't know, correct that, whereas maybe some person with a different defined center, maybe they're more suited for breath work, or
embody,
or journaling, or, you know, like, because journaling works really well for me to clear my thoughts, but maybe journaling isn't the best for someone else who have a different design. So, you know, like, it'd be really cool if it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, I see you have these different centers. It's like, well, chances are these tools might be better suited for you. So then it's like they don't have to go and experiment with like 10, 20 different things, like, oh, let's do EFT, NLP, like all these different things. But it's like, well, you know, here's a more likely hit list for you to actually try to, that might accelerate 100%. Your healing or progress or whatever.
100%. And but do you know what I think is even like that, like schooling, the way we school our kids, like the way we educate ourselves, and then HR, like literally HR, like human resources. Like imagine if we started structuring companies being like, let's look at his design and see, okay, what it like, for instance, your channel of logic, like you are literally someone who I'd be wanting to like look after society's organizational systems. Like that's where we need logic. Logic is like an overarching, like it should be like a prerequisite to go into politics, that you have this channel. Because it's like, if this happens, X, Y, Z, or more, you know, they're the sorts of, you know, things.
It's like a pilot. Okay, if you want to be a pilot, you need 20/20 vision, right? That's a requirement. So it's like, if you need to be some
spatial awareness,
overarching freaking person of the world, like you better have that tool, or that, you know, that thing that's gonna actually
logic. And that's logic, you know. So and this is the thing in human design, you can really see. It's like, well, you know, what sort of things I have the channel of inspiration. So like I need to be as individual as possible and inspire people through that embodiment, you know. There's different ways we can inspire people. There's different modalities of creativity. It's not the case that you're either creative or not. Like that's not true. There's just different expressions of creativity, and there's different expressions of intuition. So I think it's absolutely bullshit that some people are more intuitive than others. It's just, have you tapped into how your intuition works? You know, and imagine if everyone was raised as a child that way. You know, for the like, you know, imagine if you were raised from like infancy, understanding that you have an environmental authority, and that your body is a hypersensitive instrument that's picking up on all of this data. And now the trick is to train your brain how to process that data without feeling overwhelmed. because your brain also is like always in like a troubleshooting mechanism. It's always like preempting, like looking for it's not a stressful emotional doubt. It's just looking for, okay, I'm hyper aware of like when a problem's going to come up. And so when you're aware of that, you can deal with the problem, try and find the solution. Like that's what logic is looking for. It's looking for those anomalies. And so if you were aware that your brain was doing that, you'd be far less prone to anxiety. And you'd be far more empowered in your energy management of saying, okay, well, I can't solve every problem. I can't apply this logic to absolutely everything, but I'm going to let it flow through me. And when something comes up that really deserves my attention, then I can apply it with consciousness in what I'm doing. You also have the same incarnation cross as Jay-Z.
Oh, the 35, 5, 64, 63 thing?
Yeah. Right angle cross of consciousness.
Oh,
Sorry, when I
cool.
said consciousness, it reminded me of that. I was like, and he's such a cool dude.
Oh, nice. Well, I don't know much about the incarnation cross, but like from the human design app that I was playing around with, it was saying something to do with like finding your flow and then kind of sharing that, like going into that flow and showing other people how to go into their flow or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's definitely it's related to patterns, very much about patterns, and understanding like the pattern within the pattern so that you can see like, okay, well, this is what works.
Right.
You know, and figuring out what does and what doesn't work. But constantly it's about remaining constantly sort of in this state of growth. Yeah. And again, like going back to what we were talking before, it's like, how does that serve humanity? Like, goodness me, we need people like that.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool.
And so before human design, you were more into astrology, right? And then something along the line, like you found human design and that completely kind of won you over. Something like that. Like what was it like, I guess, about human design that you felt was that made you prefer it more over, let's say, astrology?
I guess astrology I see as like very, very useful in terms of understanding archetypal energies and their cycles. But the thing that really won me over about human design was, for one thing, that I saw it as like this multicultural experience in a way, like in terms of it bringing in all these different modalities. So I just immediately loved that because I was like, oh, it's enriched, like it's deeper. But it's the way that this system is written. If you read any book about it or if you sort of study it, it's always poised with like these practical tools or approaches. So it wasn't so much telling you what this information, it's not just like, here's the information. This is the energetic. It's like, this is the energetic and here's how to work with this energetic.
It's way more
according
practical.
to universal law. Yeah, way more practical, way more relevant to the personal human experience. But then it expands outwards into those higher levels of like, okay, this is how it affects the collective. Which to me, I think my sun gate is gate 4, which is like one end of your channel of logic. So it's like the gate of logic. And so I'm like constantly looking for like solutions to problems. I love solutions. I love logic. I'm like, oh, this is clearly the solution to everything that's, you know, so I just saw it as something as super helpful. That's what I loved about it. And then it just sort of melded in with things that I'd already learned. And again, like I just can't get on board with something if it doesn't make sense. You know, like I have to be able to understand how it's practically useful. I'm a 5-1 profile as well. Like we're here for like practical revolution. And I could just see that so instantly when I found this, but I can also see the danger in it as well. But it's like anything, humans can fuck anything up, can't
That's
we?
true. That's
like
true.
we can literally take the best thing and make it so bad. Like, you know,
well, I guess
that's
it's
just
like
where we have responsibility.
If there's a system that tells you how to live, it's like you said, you could overly like not be accountable for actually how you feel, and you just completely live by the thing that something else is telling you. Yeah, exactly. So then I guess that's the balance you need to find. It's like, it's good that they're telling you how you might want to live, but it's not for you to completely just ignore everything that's here and just to, you know, get into your head about everything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, unfortunately, it's not that easy, people. But it's
Yeah.
actually, in some ways, when you think about when you
Mhm,
return to embodiment,
mhm.
that is way easier than memorizing all of this shit. Like,
Yeah, it
you
is.
don't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
memorize all of
Well,
this
it's like
data.
in a way you could say maybe human design is kind of like training wheels, right? Like, you have training wheels on your bike to learn how to ride a bike, but eventually you want to take off the bike and just ride your bike whenever you want,
Totally. Yeah.
as yourself, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 so we shouldn't be in our heads about it too much. And like,
yeah,
I think once it's just introduced as a language to the
mhm,
way that you live, then you're like, cool, I'm just like super self-aware now. And you
yeah,
just run with it.
yeah,
And if you're ever at a crossroad in your life, like, or you can feel yourself going through a birth and a redeath, or
mhm,
sorry, a death and a rebirth,
yeah,
and you're like sort of wanting to like realign to some really clear energetic expression of yourself, then you can
mhm,
go back to your chart.
yeah,
And this
right,
is where, like, people I work with, they'll say to me, they'll message me like 6 months later and be like, I just re-listened to the recording and I had like
mm,
this new thing. And every time I even sort of, when it's quite rare now, but every time I do go back to my own chart, I learn something new
yeah,
because I have a fresh perspective on it through experience.
mhm.
And yeah, that's like the coolest part.
Well, yeah, I find that with anything, like even if it's astrology or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like someone could give you all your information, like an entire reading, right? And then you might read it the first time and you're like, oh, this is really interesting. Then, a year down the line, you read it again, you pick up something else, then a year down the line, and you just like when you're ready for the information, I find that's when it kind of resonates
Mm,
in that particular time and space. You're like, oh, okay, shit, this is what I need to
yeah.
know for now, and I'm ready to
Yeah.
know it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's like rereading The Alchemist. Like, it's
Oh
just one of
yeah.
those books
Oh,
you
I
have
love
to
that book.
reread every few years. Yeah, and then
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
I just realized that this is a metaphor for this. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah. Well,
didn't
I
know it.
think as your level of consciousness evolves, everything that you've perceived in the past, you see it with a new lens, with a higher,
Mm,
more conscious lens, then you might pick up things before you couldn't pick up. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Oh, dude, it's so interesting.
Oh, and can I
But
sorry, I just
yeah,
ask
I've
one more question in terms of when you
mm,
have like I guess in terms of like I guess in astrology they call it like synastry, right? I don't know if it's going to be the same word in
oh,
human design, but it's like let's say like I have I have one gate or one channel that's like half there, and then you have the other half. Like
yeah,
is that like a good thing?
electromagnetics.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
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 yeah. Or what about like
electromagnetics.
that's what it's called, electromagnetics?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And then there's like, you can have like, say you had the whole channel and someone else
yeah,
only has half that channel.
yeah.
There's still like a form of electromagnetic connection there, but like, say you would be the dominant person, so you would be leading,
Oh,
and
okay.
then my energy would like feed into that. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting because it explains how we are totally different sort of versions of ourselves with different people.
Yeah,
We are
right.
activated,
Yeah.
energetically activated by other
Yeah.
people.
But
I know.
but but does the centers have anything to do with that? Like let's say, I have an undefined open solar plexus and then someone has a defined one. Like is that like do I
Yeah,
want that? Like
100%.
do I want someone to
Usually,
to,
yeah,
to okay, yeah.
opposites attract.
Yeah.
And that's like
Yeah.
it's also like a mating strategy, like
Okay.
genetically. Like,
Okay.
imagine that. Like, we
Yeah.
want variation. It's like why
Yeah.
we tell people,
Right.
like,
Right.
we don't want to be inbred. Like, we
Yeah, right,
want
right.
variation.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's also harmony though that occurs. So when you find someone who has like parts of their chart that is
Yeah.
very similar to our own, we have like a very easeful, harmonious
Ah.
um existence with those people, and so that
Yeah.
can be experienced in that way. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many different ways that we can experience other people, but
Yeah.
it does start to open up your mind to like, okay, how is my energy interacting?
Yeah.
um Depending on your definition as well, so your single definition, but
Yeah.
people who are split definition, whether or triple split, quadruple split, or
Mhm.
wide, like single split,
Yeah.
sorry, wide or small split,
Uh-huh.
that also impacts how they need other people. So if you're, say for instance, you're a split definition,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
the gate or the gates that would bridge that split, like say for
Mhm.
instance, if you had it
Yeah.
defined that would make you a single definition, you're going
Mhm.
to naturally want those energetics. And so often you're called to those people who have the gate that would bridge your split.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that's a huge part of how we sort of relate. And that's, again, it's meant to be a part of our mating strategy as a species. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's certain things, it's like why you can see certain people are opposites, but like they complement each other, or just crazy things.
Well, and
but
for
like
single,
it's so cool.
for single definition people, like are they more the types to like to just be okay by themselves? Where's like, because like I had a well, like one of my ex-partners, she was like a quadruple split, and she would always have like a lot of friends around her, like all the time. Like it's like she couldn't be without her friends, and I'm a single, so I'm just kind of like, wow, like okay, this is so different. Like I feel so like, and she even said to me one time, she's like, oh, I'm really kind of, I admire how you're able to be so like independent, right? And I was like, well, I kind of admire how you somehow you can just attract friends all the time around you. Like that's like, it's like she needs the pieces that kind of fit with her
and it's just
design.
multi-dimensional. Exactly. That's exactly what a quadruple split is. And it's funny, single definition, I mean, it doesn't mean, people misinterpret this, because it doesn't mean that we don't need connection. I'm single definition as well. It doesn't mean that we don't need connection, or that we don't need people. It just means that energetically we don't need others to process.
Oh, okay, right.
To process energy. And so often what happens is we don't realize, like, if you have a split, or you know, triple split or whatever, the thing that you're seeking in others is energetic sort of completion of that circuitry, so that you can process energy in your system.
Right.
It's
like
different
a
to like,
in a way?
Like a what?
Like a mirror?
Or it's just
quite.
like extra circuitry. It's like circuitry in your system that needs to like sort of process. That's one way of explaining it. But I think people get it confused with, like, just based on some stuff I've seen on Instagram, I think people get it confused with attachment styles. So they think it's like, you're either codependent or you're avoidant. They use that language around it, which I'm like, okay, that's not the same. That's an emotional attachment style. This is just energetics. Like, this is just the mechanics of your system.
Right.
So we don't want to tell people like, you don't need anyone if you're single definition. It's like, well, you don't need anyone to process energy, but you might still like want emotional connection.
Right. So that's a very important like differentiation
distinction.
Right. What people have that have a lot of similar defined centers and channels, would they tend to like you said, they could be in harmony, but can they also have a tendency to be in conflict because they are similar, so like they want to battle it out?
They could. It could. It's possible. It's possible. That, like, particularly, I guess, like, you could think, like, imagine like two defined ajnas that with very like clear, you know, views and opinions on things. They might like disagree, but it just depends on the level of consciousness of the person, because there's always a way to disagree with good consciousness and good conscience. So again, it's like something to be aware of, because it allows us to keep our ego in check. Because we can go, am I just doing this because I'm like set in my ways? Like, maybe I need to remember, like, it's okay, like, I don't have to like always be the one who's right, or like whatever it is. But it's more of just like the energetic awareness, and then from there we can practice like taking responsibility. But definitely, I think, and I think we all have experience with that, like people who are really similar to us triggering us in some way.
Well,
like,
maybe they remind us aspects that we don't want to see yet.
I just realized I was like sitting in the dark.
I
just turned the light up.
No worries.
It's so interesting.
Cool. Well, I don't want to hold you back if you need to shoot off.
I probably should.
Okay.
Like, but that was a seriously mad chat.
No, awesome. No, it was so insightful, like having someone with so much knowledge of human design give a bigger picture, because I think, I don't know, like I feel like you don't get that a lot if you're just scrolling through Instagram looking at posts. It's like, no, this is like this big thing. We're like, you know, these we are all in a kind of in a hive, in a tribe kind of thing. We're trying to function with each other, and having that perspective, you know, using human design, it's very like, wow, I'm a part of something you know, really cool.
And there's a reason. There's a reason for it. But like, dude, you just picked up on it straight away. Like, you picked up what I was putting down. It's so satisfying to me.
Oh, really?
I love that. So,
yes,
it's
probably
thank you.
The mental projector thing, just wanting to just
like,
understand everything.
Yeah, but you have like a design of like serious intelligence. Like, I'm not just trying to like toot your horn either, like, because you've got this 63.4 channel. So like mental projectors are like already like hyper intelligent people, but you've got that channel of logic, which is like pretty much like very impossible to outsmart you, because you're just gonna hit people with the logic, and it's like, oh my god, I can't argue with that. So I like the fact that your logic appreciated what I was saying. It means a lot to me.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah. No, I have felt
Yeah.
that. It's gotten me into trouble in the past as well. And sometimes I feel like I have to dull that, because it feels like a blade sometimes. It's just like a laser, right? It's I need to dull it. Otherwise, sometimes people, they don't want to hear what I have to say. So then I have to like learn to pull back. But
yeah, that's the projector thing, right?
yeah,
But it's also like, you know, you sharing in the way you do through a podcast or through Instagram, like
yeah,
that's so like that's such a great way to approach it,
yeah.
because
That's what
you're
I realized.
expressing.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're expressing, and then you're going to naturally attract the people who value what you're saying
yeah,
without you
yeah.
having to
Exactly.
like cross the boundary or
Exactly.
whatever.
It's not
Like,
like you're trying to hit someone. You're just like, you're just being you. And that's, yeah, it's
mm,
such a better place to come from sometimes. Yeah.
yeah.
100%.
And I think, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is one last thing. I
Uh-huh.
think about how the internet and like our interconnection that's so heightened right now, like through social media, how
Yeah.
that's also like informing our evolution energetically. Like, that's a big one. Like, we've never been more interconnected than ever before. And so I'm like, how is that affecting the morphic field?
Right.
Definitely is something to
Yeah.
think about.
Well, I think it's almost in a way, oh, I guess it's too much to talk about. Well, like
Yeah.
it's kind of the whole like age of Aquarius thing, like communication and technology and information, right? And it's like the internet in a way
Yeah.
is it's like a man-made kind of field to connect ourselves with information that we need and a lot quicker, because they say like, oh, people nowadays they learn more in one day than people did in like 10 years or something in the past, right? So it's like we are
Yeah.
using internet and technology to create a field in which we are kind of in this massive hive mind. We're linking knowledge to each other, and then we have algorithms that kind of synchronistically give you kind of the knowledge or the video that you need, and then it's just like
I know.
and yeah.
Yeah. Ah! I
Yeah,
feel you. It's
yeah,
overwhelming,
yeah,
but it's seriously cool. It's cool.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
cool. It's cool.
Cool. I'll
But
send you
yeah,
some stuff on
thank you.
morphic resonance from Rupert Sheldrake. I think you'll really like it. And you send
Oh,
me
thank
the
you.
Caroline
Carolyn
person, right?
Mays.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
Carolyn
Okay.
Mays.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
I'll
Great.
send you her website.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah, yeah.
Tian. We'll keep
Yeah.
in touch. You're a legend.
Okay, take care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.